it's so fascinating that they're like, yeah, where are these people who doubted Saul? Let's kill him. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
seems excessive. Um, yeah. So
Seems to be their answer in a lot of situations. We saw that in Joshua. Remember at the
Yeah.
beginning
yeah,
of Joshua, once they had, instituted Joshua and he's the leader, they said, "All right, if y'all don't listen to Joshua like we listened to Moses, you're man off with your head." you
yeah,
know?
Which I mean, culturally, that's what they saw around them was when a new leader arises that wasn't from the line. You kill off all the enemies so that there's no. And it, to the credit so far, at least in the narrative, they have done what they're supposed to do in being a light to the rest of the nation. So we don't have to live this way. But wasn't it was because the leaders were being merciful and listening and wise, not because the people were on board with it necessarily.
but I think that raises an interesting point that when we stop trying to mystify all of this and we try to stop having high spirituality about all of this and take some of this at the level of a history lesson,
Yeah,
we see that a lot of this makes sense. Not just like, yes, there's the level of it makes sense for the time and the place and the culture and all of that sort of stuff. Yes. However, there's also the line of, remember what we always say, right? That the Bible is one continuous narrative that ultimately leads to Jesus.
yeah,
And if we look at the actions of the New Testament followers of Jesus, and if we look at the actions of the people who had a certain conception of what the Messiah would look like and all of that sort of stuff, I'm not saying it was a correct idea. I am saying, though, that it makes sense.
yeah,
It makes sense that there would be a particular mindset and a particular framework that the people would be working off of. And again, um, not to so as a resource, if you are looking for a redefinition and an explanation of the redefinition of sovereignty, go to the tail end of the series, For Such a Time as This, that
yeah,
was done a couple of years ago on Buddy Walk. Specifically, Andrew came on, and a big part of what we talked about during that episode is the fact that the word sovereignty, the concept of God's sovereignty, is a biblical concept, but it needs to be couched and contextualized in how the Bible defines it,
yeah,
not how modern dialect and thought define it.
yeah,
And likewise, when we're looking at this idea that ultimately leads us away from this idea that the Jews killed Jesus,
hmm,
go back to the Christmas special that Andrew and I did over on Buddy Walk a couple of years ago, where we went through and kind of skipped, like jumped from one gospel account to another gospel account and laid out the entire
not
thing, or
not
not Christmas,
Christmas. It was
Easter.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was Buddy Walk Through Holy Week is what we called it.
yeah, 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 yeah. But we laid out the entirety of Holy Week.
Hmm.
And we get into some of that mindset of, you know, understanding some more of the framework. But I bring all of that forward, I start to touch on the New Testament in talking about these things to give a wider context of the benefit of paying attention here, paying attention
Yeah,
in these stories, because there's a mindset that develops within the people of God that will only be expanded on and fortified and formed by the situations and circumstances that we are going to follow as we go through the Old Testament, but also logged and chronicled in other works that sit outside of the biblical canon, that sit for
Yes.
a lot of people more so in the realm of Jewish history. You guys have anything on that?
Yeah, the sovereignty piece has always been, I think, an area that is going to come up in these type of passages because things are happening, and God is working towards an ultimate plan, and just realizing that um, God's kingdom coming and His will being done, is not at the cost of people making decisions and choices. It's sometimes in spite of the
Yeah.
choices
Yeah.
that people make. Well, he's still working, as the New Testament says, all things together for the good of them who love the Lord and who are called according to His purpose. Somehow,
Yeah.
some way, outside of our ability to even understand most of the time, He's able to bring about, the thing that He said was coming. He said it's coming, it's going to happen, you know and I'm going to work within the context of culture, the context of humans making choices, and my will is going to be done. It is an
Hmm.
unstoppable train that is coming, and I can do it even um in spite of whatever the cultural norm is, whatever the choices are, the people, and that's what makes sovereignty so uh, such a powerful concept when you understand it that way. Not
Yeah.
sovereignty as God manipulating people and moving us like chess pieces, and here you're going to do this whether you like it or not, because if God said this, you're going to have to do it. Actually, you don't have to do it. I think specifically and you guys mentioned Ruth, or no, Esther. Sorry, you mentioned Esther. Said Esther, even if you don't do it, God will find a way. So you can either do it, or somebody else will come along and get this done. But that is a perfect example of God working within the context of the culture and the choices of the people.
Well, and even within the narrative of what we just read, I mean, that's the importance of why it says, he was given a new heart. He was given a new heart. This is not the same person. This is not the same person. When the Spirit of God is on him, this is not the same person hiding in the closet. This is the guy out on the road prophesying. This is a different guy. And so, I mean, that's why, you quoted it without quoting it. That's why Jesus tells us to pray for those things, right? We're supposed to pray for the kingdom to come, His will to be done, not because it's not going to happen, but because we need a heart to accept that that's what's going to happen,
Yes.
and that we can be a part of it. And that's what the again, that's part of why I think it's so important also to look at the end of the story here, where he says nobody is going to die today. The mercy and grace on side of is that the we're back to what we say all the time. The will and the kingdom of God is about the saving of people, not the destruction of people. So why would we, who just did the will of God in saving His people from this oppressor, why would we then go and not save others? This is what the heart of God looks like. This is what the new heart looks like, and it's spelled out very clearly that even in the midst of war, saving people is the goal when the heart of God and the will of God is what is at the forefront.